In the last few weeks, IELTS have released new details about how their examiners for speaking and writing decide your score. In this video, we're going to look at what they've said and how it can help you to get a band 7, 8 or 9 in your IELTS exam. We're going to look at 5 specific steps that you can take to make sure you have the best chance of a high score in IELTS. So, let's get started. Now, before we get onto the new details, let's do a very quick summary of the details we already knew for what you need to do to get a high score. So we'll look at speaking first. So for your vocabulary in the speaking test, if you want to get a band 7 or higher, you have to use some idioms, some collocations, some very specific phrases, and you have to use them in an accurate way. For grammar, you need to use some complex sentences and don't make too many grammar mistakes. For fluency, first of all, answer the question directly and don't have any big, long pauses when you're thinking of the right word to say. And pronunciation, you should be easy to understand and you should push some words together. Don't speak word by word like this. Then for writing, the vocabulary and the grammar requirements for band 7 or higher are basically the same as speaking. Vocabulary, you have to use some higher level phrases, idioms, you have to use your language naturally, and grammar, some complex sentences, and don't make too many mistakes. So that part is the same. But the other 2 areas for writing, first of all, task achievement, we have to totally answer all parts of the question in a very clear and logical way. And the other requirement is coherence and cohesion, where we have to make our answer organized and easy to understand. So those are the things that we already knew you needed to do to get a band 7 or higher for your IELTS exam. But now it's time to look at the updates. So previously, the band descriptors, which is kind of the paperwork that the examiners use to decide your score, they were quite vague. They were sort of mysterious. So you had to go through the IELTS examiner training to truly understand what you had to do. But now, the British Council have released some more details. They've kind of cleared away the mystery a little bit. So now it's much clearer the things that we have to do to get those higher level scores. So we're going to look at 5 specific things that you can do to get those band 7 or higher scores. First of all, let's talk about IELTS speaking, and in particular, fluency. So we often think about pausing, leaving a pause as kind of a problem. But the new IELTS band descriptors tell us we can use pausing in a smart way to actually help our score. So we should leave a small pause, not a very long pause, just a small one, at the end of a sentence and after commas in our sentence. For example, look at this sentence. So, on the one hand, the food would be amazing there, but on the other hand, it's sure to be really expensive. Now, you might think that because I said that fast, that would be better fluency. But it was kind of hard to understand and it didn't have a great feeling. So it would be better to say it, on the one hand, the food would be amazing there, but on the other hand, it's sure to be really expensive. And when we say it like that with those pauses, it just sounds much more natural and we get our meaning across much more clearly. So pauses actually help us. And we can also use pauses to add a little feeling of drama to our story. So for example, I might say, I thought it was just a regular dinner for 2, but it turned out to be a surprise birthday party for me. You know, I've left that pause just before and after but, and it gives that sort of excited feeling. So it makes our English much more interesting to listen to. Now, the second tip is to use elision. Elision basically means when we are saying lots of words quite quickly, and we remove some of the sounds from those words to make the words flow better or make the whole sentence sound more authentic. So you might know about, if we say going to, usually we would just say gonna. Or if we say want to, we would say wanna. And those are types of elision. But there are many, many different types that we can add to our English to just make it flow and make it sound more like a native speaker. And that's another one of the requirements for a higher level of pronunciation, but also getting higher fluency in English. So let's practice a couple. The first one is trying to. Now we don't say trying to, we would usually say tryna. So let's put that in a sentence because it sounds weird by itself. So I was trying to study, but the music was too loud next door. I was trying to study, but the music was too loud next door. And the second one is do you becomes ja. It's sort of a weird, not even a word, it's just a sound, ja. So, for example, when they asked me, do you want to come with us? I said, yes, absolutely. Do you want to come with us? When they asked me, do you want to come with us? So those are just two examples of elision, and we actually have a video with a lot more examples, and the link for that is just down here, so you can check that out. Now, something that isn't mentioned in any of the band descriptors, but that I know from my experience as an IELTS examiner is actually important, is having a native English accent. Now that can be an American accent, it can be a British, an Australian, a Scottish, whichever accent. But if you do have a native accent, it just automatically puts you in the mind of the examiner in those higher level, those higher band areas. And that's where we want to be. We want the examiner to think of us as a band 8, a band 9, that kind of thing. So having a native accent is sort of the secret ingredient of that. And if you want to develop a British accent, just like Harry Potter and the royal family and people like that, we have a great course for that. It's called British English Pronunciation, The Complete Guide, and the link is under the video. The third step that we can take is related to fluency and coherence. Coherence basically means, does your answer make sense? Now, there are some phrases that we use in English that kind of have a feeling to them, and we have to make sure that we match those phrases with the right words afterwards so that the feeling of everything is kind of logical. Now, that's kind of vague. Let me give you an example. So, to be honest, that phrase in English has the feeling that you're going to say something negative. So it's usually, almost always, followed by something negative. For example, to be honest, I'm not sure it's a great idea. So we're giving some negative feedback. The problem is that many people don't realize this. And they'll say something like, to be honest, I love it, it's fantastic. So the examiner is expecting a negative thing, and you give a positive thing. And so your answer stops being logical. The coherence score goes down. Now, for this specific phrase, to be honest, if you want to say something positive, you can say, honestly. And that doesn't have that negative feeling. Let me give you two examples. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of his music. And that would be totally correct. Or, honestly, I really love his music. So, if you want to say positive, you say honestly. If you want to say negative, you say to be honest. Now, these are just two examples, but English phrases are very often full of meaning. So it's important to read some example sentences using the phrases that you commonly like to use to make sure that you're not using these phrases in the wrong way. For the last two tips, we're going to move to writing. And first, we're talking about writing task 1 in the academic test. So looking at graphs or diagrams and describing the data. So the key detail here that the new band descriptors have told us is that there can't be anything speculative. So, what does that mean? Speculative means anything that is outside of what we can see in the diagram or in the graph. So for example, if you get a question with a diagram about how bees make honey, the process for how they create it, then you can describe what you see in each picture. So the bees fly around until they find a flower and so on. So it's the things that you can really see. What you shouldn't do is kind of imagine things that you can't see, like telling a story, like saying the bees woke up early on a Monday morning. They were really tired from last night because they'd made so much honey yesterday, but they were determined and they decided, they talked to each other and they decided to, go and make some more honey today. They left their hive and they found a flower in their favorite color. So all of that stuff, like giving human emotions to the bees, we can't see it in the diagram, so we shouldn't write it. And that's a super important thing. You have to be very strict with yourself and only describe the things that you can see. And it's the same when we look at a graph or a bar chart. You might be tempted to say why this country's population is increasing. Maybe you actually know something about it in the real world, in real life. But you can't do that unless it's on the page, okay? So we don't say why we think something is happening. We just say this thing is happening, all right? So that's the idea of nothing speculative. Only write about the things that are in the data. The final tip that we can learn from the newly updated band descriptors is something for writing task 1 and task 2, and it's related to grammar and it's related to coherence, like making your answer easy to understand. And it is the use of pronouns, particularly using pronouns like he and his, she and hers, it, its, they, theirs. Okay, so quite often we misuse those ones, and I'm going to show you an example in a second of how that can happen. It's very easy. It can easily be done. So what you have to do at the end of the test, when you've finished writing, is to go back and carefully check all of those pronouns and make sure that your writing makes sense. So let's take a look at an example, and you see if you can figure out what the problem is. The boy was very excited to see his grandpa in the south of France. He was 8 years old and it was his first time visiting his house in France. So, what would the issue be with that? What is the problem that we can see? The problem is that we're overusing the his and the he. So the rule is that if you get to the end of one sentence, like that first sentence, we have two characters in that sentence, the boy and his grandpa. Both of those could be described as he. So it becomes very confusing when we start using he, his, and not saying who we're talking about. So a better version would be like this. The boy was very excited to see his grandpa in the south of France. The boy was 8 years old, and it was his first time, because now the latest person is the boy, so his first time visiting his grandpa's house in France. So now we have everything in the right place. We don't have a grandpa who's 8 years old, and the grandpa isn't visiting his own house for the first time or anything like that. You know, the whole thing now makes sense because we've gone back, we've checked the pronouns, and we've made sure that everything is in the right place and it's pointing to the right people. So those are the 5 things that we can learn from the newly updated IELTS band descriptors to help us get a very high score for speaking and for writing. Now, if you do want to find out more about those, do a bit more practice, and get some extra information for preparing for the IELTS speaking and writing test, we have a live class coming very soon. The details are down here under the video. So those are 5 specific steps that you can take based on the newly updated IELTS band descriptors to make sure you get a high score in your IELTS speaking and writing tests. If you're preparing right now for IELTS and you want to get the best score possible, we also have a full course. It's over 50 hours of video material about all 4 areas of the IELTS exam: reading, listening, writing, and speaking. And it's available right now. The link is down here. Make sure to check out our IELTS speaking preparation playlist if you want to see more videos like this one. If you found this useful, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm Francis. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.